first science experiment under the content strand Living World is in line with the early stage 1 syllabus.
We're going to be looking at the testable question, what happens to the leaves of celery stems when we change the colour of the water?
The first thing that we do before we actually do the experiment is to make a prediction. We're going to ask the early stage 1 students what they think is going to happen to the celery. I think that maybe the celery will start to change the colour. The celery stem in the red water might start to show hints of red in the leaves.
Now for our variables. The dependent variable, or the variable we're measuring in this investigation, is the colour of the celery. Since this is early stage 1, there is no definitive way to measure this, so our results will be gathered using vocabulary that accurately describes the outcomes. The independent variable, or the variable that the scientist deliberately changes, is the colour of the water in which the celery is placed. The controlled variables, or the ones that don't change, are things like the temperature of the water, the amount of water, and the size of the celery stem. Here we have our celery, fresh out of the fridge, still wrapped in cling wrap. This is what we're going to be using in our experiment. We're going to get a glass. We're going to fill it with some water. We're doing this so that we can show in the experiment that we're being as accurate as we can. We're using 3 different colours here. We've got pillar box red, we've got green, and we've got yellow. First of all, pillar box red. Next up is green. And lastly is yellow. Give it a bit of a mix. We're going to grab some celery from our bunch. We want to make sure there's lots of leaves so we can really clearly see what happens to the celery. We're going to put 1 stem of celery in the yellow water. We're going to put 1 stem of celery in the green water. And then we're going to put 1 final stem of celery in our red water. Now we're going to wait for about an hour and see what happens.
One hour later.
Time for the analysis. The first celery stem was in a glass of lukewarm water with red food colouring. Look at what happened to it. The red colouring from the water travelled up the stem to show on the leaves. If you look closely, you can see the red tinges at the tips. The second celery stem was in a glass of water with green food colouring. The green got really strong. Since the celery was already green, it's a bit harder to see the results, but comparing it to what it looked like before the experiment, it certainly got a lot greener. And our third celery stem was in a glass of water with yellow food colouring. The results aren't as clear in this specimen, but you can see that it's still a different colour to what it looked like before the experiment. We can draw a few conclusions from this. First of all, each celery stem showed a change in colour after spending an hour in coloured water. The celery in the red water showed the strongest results, with the leaves quite clearly tinged to the same colour as the water. The other 2 stems also showed evidence of colour absorption through the water. After spending an hour in a glass of coloured water, our celery stems started to change from their original green to whatever colour was in the glass. We can draw the final conclusion that our prediction was correct.